Wanted to take a minute and introduce myself. A lot of people have been calling me this week and wanting to know who I am, what I'm about, and why I'm running for commissioner in District 1. And so I've shared who I am and what I'm about with them when they asked. Came home today, had an interesting conversation with my wife, and she said, "Adrian, you've done so much for the community and you've raised awareness on so many different issues, but do people really know who you are?" And I thought, I've been spending so much time trying to share information and share factual information, I should say. I'm very factual when it comes to that stuff. And I realized she's right. A lot of people don't know who I am and what I'm about and what I stand for. So that's why we're doing this video. I'm just going to give you a brief idea of who I am and why I do what I do. I started off in Clovis, New Mexico. It's a rural community on the east side of the state, also known as Little Texas area. And I was raised there. I then went and I got my professional work experience in Phoenix, Arizona. Got my licensure for cardiopulmonary therapy, and I worked in the medical field for about 24 years. When I was doing that, as you grow and evolve, I was asked by a nursing group to support a union effort. Let me be very clear, I'm not 100% pro-union and I'm not anti-union. I believe there's a time and a place for everything. I met with the union people. Where I worked at the time was having a lot of problems. There was a serious increase in deaths in our adult population, and that's why they wanted to bring in the union. So I supported it in my group, which was the cardiopulmonary therapy component part of it. And I'm not the type of person that's going to browbeat you. You make your own decision. So I simply was a vessel in that deal, and I shared information. Unfortunately, we ended up losing the union vote, and they came after me. And they made it a point to kind of slander me and make it appear as if though I had done some things. Go through a 3-year lawsuit, ended up winning my case. And the reason I won my case is because under federal court, I was allowed to record all the information, which I did. And we were able to prove that each and every one of them that they had attacked me when we went to court lied, unfortunately. Sometimes that happens in politics and in life. So I was really frustrated, and I was like, man, I'm in my mid-40s. Talked to my attorney, and I said, I don't have the time or the energy to go to law school. Can you help me can you make a suggestion? He said, well, what do you want to do, Adrian? And I said, well, I want to help people. That's what I want to do. I want to find ways to help people and be happy. And so that's where my journey began when it came to, if you want to call it, the political realm. I had a friend that had some contacts at the state legislature. I worked there for about 2 years doing what they call an attendant for the senators. I had the opportunity to sit behind the scenes and see how our government works, because up to that point I was not involved in politics. I don't come from a political family. And I sat there and I started seeing things that I didn't really like. And the rumors that we have out here in the everyday world where we live, I got to experience a lot of that, and I got to see things that I didn't appreciate. And I thought, as citizens, we should have the ability to, talk to our government and make sure that they're doing right by us. And that's when I stepped out and I started becoming interested in what my attorney had directed me to, is get your degree in political science. I want to be very upfront. I have not finished my degree in political science. I'm short by a math and I think a English class. And I met my wife at the time, and we ended up getting married. And during the course of that, I took a little job. I'm kind of old school, and I had to provide the ring for my wife. I had to pay for the hall. I had to do those things that, in my old-fashioned ways, I believe a man should do. And what ended up happening was, we got married. I'd taken a little security job, just to make a few bucks like most of us do. And what ended up happening is a lady kept coming up to me and says, "You're different, Adrian." You should open your own company. I didn't have a clue how to run a security company. I'm not an ex-law enforcement officer. I'm not the ex-military person. I had no idea. But I took it as a compliment, and she kept on me. And she had a Disney production coming up, and she said, Adrian, if you do it, I will hire you. And I asked her, I said, why do you have so much faith in me? And she goes, Adrian, I've never seen somebody like you. You come out here, you have a smile, you direct people, you're helpful, you're thoughtful. And she goes, there's not enough people in this industry that own companies. And so I just feel strongly that if you were to do it, I'd like to help you out. And I said, awesome. I came home that night, talked to my wife, scared, of course. It's always scary taking a leap of faith like that. And I did. I opened it up. And here we are. I'm a business owner. I'm going on 9 years owning a security company, constantly improving, constantly growing, and constantly doing things with integrity. And that's the only way you get jobs, and that's the only way you can maintain any company is with, providing a good service, making sure that you're doing right by the customer, making sure you're doing right by the people. And I don't see very much difference between that and being a commissioner for a town. So going back to when I was in the schooling part of my life, it was really interesting to me. I was going into a class one day and we had a final, and the teacher asked me, her name was Dr. Kara Carroll. She says, Adrian, have you finished your second final? I said, no, ma'am, I haven't. I said I was going to finish it this week. She goes, you may want to pay attention to this story I'm going to share with you. It's about Japanese Americans in Clovis, New Mexico. Piqued my interest because I'm from Clovis. I didn't know anything about Japanese Americans. When I was raised there, we didn't even have any Japanese people in our community. But I went into class. She told the story. I then went to Clovis, probably just, I don't know what made me do it. I went about 2 weeks later, and I went and talked to the mayor. Ironically, I happened to know the mayor working at the hospital as a cardiopulmonary therapist when I got out of school. He was a pharmacist, but now he's the mayor. And I told him this story, and he tells me, Adrian, my mom was a school teacher, and she remembers that. One of them was a really good friend. And he said, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, I'm going back home. He said, can you stay another day and share this story with the commission, city commission, I should say. And I said, yeah, I could do that. I could miss one day's class. And so I did. I stayed. And I went and told the story of the Japanese Americans to the commission. They heard the story. I didn't know what I was going to say in the beginning. I was simply going to speak from my knowledge base. But that night before I left, I received a letter from a guy named Dr. Roy Ibahara. He is a famous eye surgeon out of the Cleveland Clinic who lives in Ohio as we speak. And he had sent me a letter. And I went home that evening and read the letter. And it tore me up to see how it affected that generation of people who were kicked out of our town simply because of their race. And when I did that, I remember going to the town council because I didn't know what I was going to say. Like I said, I was just simply going to speak on what I learned. I read that letter to the town council. Reading a letter at a podium, you're looking down and you're reading the letter. And when I got done reading that letter, I looked up. There's not a single dry eye in that entire commission. That's the power of community. That's the power of us knowing and feeling and taking care of each other. The mayor then asked me, Adrian, how can we make amends? What can we do to make this right? And I said, I don't know. He said, do you think they would come back and do and allow us to make an apology to them? I said, I don't know. I don't know all the players. You're talking 75, 80 years ago. I knew Dr. Roy Ibihara was alive, but I didn't know anybody else. He said, well, we have our annual parade. Do you think they would come back and be the grand marshal for the parade? And I said, I can ask. And I did. And Dr. Roy Ibihara and his wife, Aiko, agreed. And they were going to come back. And they were actually Christians They had converted from Buddhism to Christianity while they were in Clovis, while they were children. Them and their families. They were the first Christian family. That church still is in Clovis. So they asked me, do you think he can come back? I said, sure, I can ask him. And what I ended up doing was I found out there was another segment of Japanese Americans that were children at the time too. The Kimuras, Fred and Lily Kimura, they were still alive. And we brought them down for the parade. It's a big deal in Clovis, Pioneers Day Parade. It's our rodeo and annual festival. And they actually had a name for the parade, which they changed. And the name of the new parade was going to be Welcome Back Home. And they were the grand marshals in the parade. They had 3 or 4 days of people recognizing the wrongs that were done to them. And I went to the church. It still existed. I told them the story. We had breakfast at the church on Sunday. They were awarded keys to the city. That's what community is about. You know, we all make mistakes. We can all be forgiven. And I really, at that time, realized how important community is. So I live in Edgewood now. So I come here and I'm raising awareness on issues that I think are critical to us. I think that anybody who's been paying attention, I go to the meetings. I never go in there with my opinion. I always have documents, and I always share those documents because I don't want anybody taking my word for anything. I want to be able to prove what I'm saying. I'm just a big believer in that. And so when I do go to these meetings and provide the documents, I leave because I can hang my head up high knowing I'm not just simply sharing an opinion, I'm sharing facts. And it's been a growing experience here in Edgewood with the difficulties we've had with our commissions over time. We're 26 years into our town, and I really feel like we can make some improvements, and that's why I'm running. I enjoy helping others. I enjoy staying up to date on rules, regulations, learning. That never ends. You know, for any kids watching this, just heed my words. Education never stops. When it does, you're probably not learning anything. It's important to continue to learn. I can't tell you how important it is. Even at my age, you've got to continue to learn. And I see so much potential here in Edgewood. It's unreal. We're right off a major highway. We've got so much opportunities for economic development, and we are sitting on opportunities. I know that we move out here because we don't want to overgrow, but there's other ways of growing. You just got to do it smart. I don't believe in boogeyman politics. That's for one. And what I mean by that is people simply providing lip service to scare you into a thought process. I believe that we, as any type of person holding the trust of the public, should be able to provide documentation to you and explain to you how and why this came to be. And that's how I got to where I am today. And I want to thank my wife for challenging me today and reminding me that it's not about me, it's about us, and it's about Edgewood. And if I'm going to run in this election, which I am, and I would appreciate your support and your vote, you got to know who I am. You got to know what I'm about. You got to know what's inside of here and the core of who Adrian Chavez Sr. is. And I just gave you a brief overview of who I am, but I hope you get the sense of I'm a compassionate, kind, caring individual, lives in our community and wants to do right by our town. That's it. End of story.